Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching with TBA Rabbinic Intern, Nico Losorelli.
So our course today, our shiur today is called, let me move this, I can't see half of you because it's blocking your face. Our shiur today is called the Halachot of Pesach, spiritual or practical. So a really fun and interesting debate came up in one of my classes a week or two ago when I taught a class similar to this, in which I wanted to go through the Halachot, as some of the the beginning Halachot of Pesach, the laws of Pesach, in order for us to get studying and begin to fulfill that mitzvah of studying those laws of Pesach, those Halachot of Pesach. And there was one camp that was on team, this is just the Shulchan Aruch, our code of Jewish law, is our to-do manual, right? And it tells us exactly what to do. It's for practical purposes. We don't have to get too deep in it. And then there was the other camp that was like, well, I actually think it's really interesting to talk about the purposes of the various different rituals that we do throughout Pesach and throughout Jewish ritual in general. And maybe the Shulchan Aruch can be a launch pad for those conversations. And before we dive in, I'm curious to hear any reflections on this dichotomy of like, no, it's just meant to be practical, or no, it's spiritual, maybe it's practical and it's also spiritual. Does that land with anybody? Is anybody on team practical? Raise your hand if you're on team practical. Okay, we got one tentative hand. Raise your hand if you're on team spiritual. Wow, no one wants to vote, huh? Oh, what can you do?
It's fun.
I'm
on team
okay, team fun? Team fun?
Team both.
Team what?
Both.
Team both? Who's on team both?
What is the question?
There you go. So the question is, our Halachot of Pesach, as we find them in the Shulchan Aruch, the laws of Pesach, are they just practical or are they just spiritual? And of course, the natural answer has already emerged that many of us feel that they should be both. So we're going to move through just a study of a couple Halachot, both to sort of absorb the practical aspects of what we need to do when we begin to do Bedigat Chametz in our homes for Pesach, which is coming, and every day I'm like, oh, it's one day closer to Pesach. Bedigat Chametz, of course, being when we search our homes for the last bit of Pesach after all last bits of Chametz, that's anything leavened, after we've done all of our cleaning, and we set it aside to burn it in the morning. So if you see it right at the top of the page, we have our first halakha right here from the Shulchan Aruch. Can I have a volunteer read the English for us? Yeah.
We learn the halachot of Pesach for 30 days before Pesach. Then the Ramah Israelis said it is customary to buy wheat to give to the poor for Pesach, and whoever is residing in the city for 12 months must give for this.
Right, thank you. So the key point in this particular halakha is that we learn the halachot of Pesach 30 days before Pesach begins. Now we're, I don't know about you, but I feel a little bit behind on that myself. I started right at 30 days before, and I've sort of fallen behind, but here's our chance to sort of start again and get into it. So, is there a question?
No, but the other thing is that the Ramah says that there's a custom called Ma'od Chitim.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'od Chitim is to give money for wheat for people to buy who can't afford to buy Pesach.
Right, and this is part of a whole larger and separate conversation from this particular short shiur, but it's interesting because there's a whole debate about who is responsible for giving this, who's responsible for providing people with these materials, how long do they need to be there for, and what is their intention, and it's a very interesting line of thinking. Yeah?
So is the giving of the money for wheat, is that done right after Purim? Like right after Yom Kippur, you go nail the first nail and you is this something that you do? It was part of your, we're in this Thursday.
Right, that's a good question. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I have to imagine that since the Ramah has provided this gloss here, that maybe we should sort of be quick to do this particular mitzvah. Also, practically speaking, as it gets closer to Pesach, and whether people have matzah or don't have matzah, I think it's a little bit more practical to provide those materials then. But I really think it could be read either way. But the truth is, I don't know the exact answer to that question. Yeah.
It's kind of strange that it doesn't say give the poor money to buy wheat, but rather you have to buy the wheat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is there distrust there or concern about how the money would be used?
Mm-hmm.
You have to specifically buy the appropriate wheat.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Does anybody have any response to that? Just curious. Not really what I expected. Yeah.
What you're saying is that you need to some people outside, instead of buying food, sometimes you give them food, they give you. They just say money, if you give money, you don't think buying food and they're buying food. So I know more times probably you do that with work.
Right. Yeah.
They have another need here.
Right. Right. So I think that's an interesting point about the maybe there are other needs, and why not just money? So we can give them money to folks money to buy their own wheat, but maybe because there's a fear, excuse me, or there's an awareness that there are some competing needs, but that money won't be used for the particular purpose of buying wheat to make matzah, right? So I think in these terms, that we have to give wheat to the poor for the purposes of fulfilling mitzvot on Pesach for eating, perhaps making, and even selling matzah.
So look, we have that. You have that debate very often. If somebody asks you for, the beggars who ask you for money, and if you, for example, think that they're an alcoholic or something, and they use it for liquor, or they're a drug addict and they use it for drugs. The question is whether you give them that, or you give them a Starbucks card, or something, a nutrition card, or something like that. So it's interesting because it says one should buy it and distribute it.
Mm-hmm.
No, if someone asks me for money to eat, I buy them something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't just give them money. I'll
Sure. I think I feel like we're sort of like going off on a tangent that's a little less related to the class itself, which I think is very interesting. For those at home, I apologize, I haven't been repeating some of the answers, but we're sort of discussing the reasons why we're commanded to, or it's a custom to give wheat to the poor as opposed to give them money to buy it themselves, which you find in the first source on the page. But I'd like to table that for a moment so we can move forward with this idea of why do we study the Halachot of Pesach 30 days before Pesach begins. So let's go ahead and go on to the Mishnah Berurah. I'm going to read just the specific part in English that's relevant to this question. So, Shoalim b'Hilchot Pesach. So ask about the Halachot of Passover. This is the second English entry on the first page. The translation is, behold, Moses was standing on Pesach Rishon, the first Pesach, the sort of Pesach we all know, and sort of expounding or warning on all of the halachot, the laws of Pesach Sheni, which is the second Passover. And this is the law for the rest of the Yom Tovim, that we also expound on them 30 days before each Yom Tov. So the Pesach Sheni, is anybody familiar with Pesach Sheni? Anybody want to take a crack at explaining what that is before we get into the biblical
If you're
source?
impure,
Yeah.
then you cannot celebrate Pesach on time. There's a do-over 30 days later, which is called Pesach.
Great, and thank you. So Pesach Sheni is exactly that, basically a do-over. If you are, for whatever reason, ritually impure, and aren't able to offer the Passover sacrifice, then there's a second opportunity to do that 30 days later. And because Moses was expounding on the laws of Passover, of Pesach Sheni 30 days before that Pesach Sheni, that's where we get the idea of like, okay, we should be studying the laws of Pesach 30 days before Passover itself. And then that becomes extended to the rest of our Yom Tovs, the rest of our holidays. And for that source, can I have a volunteer to read? If you flip the page, on the back side of that page, you'll see in the English, the source is Numbers 9, 6 through 12. Would anybody like to read that out loud in the English for us, for the class? Yeah, sure.
I can read again.
Yeah.
Judy wants to give me Speak, microphones. Okay. It's taken from Numbers chapter 9, verses 6 through 12. But there were some householders who were impure by reason of a corpse, and could not offer the Passover sacrifice on that day. Appearing that same day before Moses and Aaron, those householders said to them, Impure though we are by reason of a corpse, why must we be debarred from presenting Adonai's offering at its set time with the rest of the Israelites? Moses said to them, Stand by and let me hear what instructions Adonai gives about you. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelite people, saying, When any party, whether you or your posterity, who is defiled by a corpse or is on a long journey, would offer a Passover sacrifice to Adonai, they shall offer it in the second month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and they shall not leave any of it over until morning. They shall not break a bone of it. They shall offer it in strict accordance with the laws of the Passover sacrifice.
Great, thank you. So this is where we get this idea of studying those laws of Passover and then the rest of the Yom Tovim, Yom Tovim, 30 days before their occurrence. And you can see the stakes are really high here, right? That like, well, why should we not have the opportunity to offer the Passover sacrifice just because we happen to have become impure by no fault of our own? And it's a great moment of sort of halachic debate in the Torah of us saying, you know what? Great question. Let me check in with God and see what God has to say, and then I'll get back to you. And we don't do our rituals, everything that we do for nothing. There are spiritual reasons. There are sort of like cosmic reasons, some might even say, which sort of moves us into this idea of like, well, practice, halachot, is both practical and spiritual. So in that vein, I wanted to just move through a couple of halachot and sort of generate conversation about the meaning of it, the various action symbols that occur in these halachot. So let's get started with the first one here, the Shulchan Aruch or Chaim 433.1, which is right below that biblical text there. So the laws for checking chametz, so containing 11 sections, that's just the headline of the Shulchan Aruch. The checking should be done by candlelight, not moonlight. If one did not check on the night of the 14th, when checking during the day of the 14th, one should not check by sunlight, but by candlelight. However, for a room with bright light, if one checked by sunlight, it suffices. And the same applies to checking opposite a chimney in a room. Let's just take a second, let that marinate a little bit. So there's a lot going on here. What are some things that we notice in this particular halakha? Symbols, actions. Just shout about anything. Practical, great, okay. Herb, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I think you could see more chametz by candlelight.
And why do we think that is?
Because it's like a spotting right on the scene of the crime versus just being out there.
Mm-hmm. So there's a question about the quality of the light and how that helps us do what we need to do.
Like a flashlight.
Yeah. Right, great.
I just want to point out that something that very few of you know. Why is the lulav up on top of the ark?
Little trivia.
Sweeping
great
up
trivia,
the
yeah.
chametz.
Does anybody know?
For sweeping the chametz?
You're supposed to keep it up there until Erev Pesach and use it when you do the Dikat Chametz to sweep out the rest of the Chametz, which connects to two holidays.
Yeah.
So one of the things we should see is how good our rabbis are. This is missing right after Pesach.
Oh boy. You know this is being recorded, right?
And that is that they've kept it up there all this time. And the question is, whether they're going to remember to remove it.
There you go. And it's
Warn them.
yeah, I will. And you know what's funny is last year.
Because they didn't even change the clock.
Last year we forgot to take our lulavim for when we did Biur Chametz in the neighborhood. So now we have 4 fronds. We have 2 sets. So it's going to be a lot of sweeping and a lot of fire. So not controlled by us. It'll be in a controlled environment with one of the shuls around here. Great. So the question of different types of light. What are there any spiritual qualities to the different types of light? Like, let's try to pull out some of the spiritual ideas of this. Candlelight is more spiritual. Can you say more about that?
A lot of religions.
Well, hold on. We had an answer right here. Go ahead.
If you have a candle and you're looking at fire and you're in control of looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Want me to take yours?
Yeah, thank you very much.
And sunlight is far away.
Mm-hmm.
So the candle is closer. And you're looking for it.
You're gonna refill.
You should be looking for it at night. Yeah, you should be.
Yeah, so you're checking at night, you have to use a candle.
So the candle itself so if I can just reflect back for the people at home, has a spiritual quality to it. We use candles for a lot of different things. For when we light candles for Shabbat, for Yom Tov, and otherwise. So this is already an object that has a spiritual quality to it. I think Rosa, and then can you please tell me your name again? Rosemary. I thought that was what it was. Okay.
Think about it, candles, a lot of religions use candles. Quite a few, it's quite common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Rosa is saying a lot of religions use candles. It's pretty common, which sort of speaks to like the practical element of things, right? Like candles were kind of like light bulbs, right? That's how we lit our homes. And then it became almost ritualized in many ways, especially for Shabbat, of like, look, we can't sit here in the dark. We gotta light some candles, but there has to be some sort of reason for lighting those candles. Rosemary?
I think there are two qualities of candle. One is that everybody can make it if they don't have it. And in old times, they had probably beads, they can use knots. It's easier to make. And secondly, in the Oriental, Middle Eastern poems, candle is always a sacrifice.
Oh, interesting.
So he dies, so we have the light. So always in poems it comes many times that candle burn, but then the light doesn't burn.
Right. So like again, another moment of the candle itself being spiritual and being sort of common in some other traditions and across the world, which is really beautiful. Yeah.
Why not a torch?
Why not a torch?
Not a candle that has multiple wicks.
Yeah, good question. So let me ask you a question.
Practical reason.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Eddie set something on fire.
yeah.
No, I mean.
No, of course. Yeah. That's.
You're going into nooks, crannies, crevices.
So we're worried about lighting things on fire.
You're going to set something on fire, something will burn.
Right. So yeah, there's a practical reason for sakana, for danger, that we may light something on fire. Yeah.
I'm going to suggest a possible spiritual reason for this. I might be way off, but the bees make the wax, I assume, and bees make honey, dvash, Eretz Yisrael, and wheat from the lechem. This is one of the four grains of Israel.
The wheat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not in Eretz Israel yet, but
So
maybe.
So we're saying there's like. So are we saying there's a connection with the davash, with the honey, as it relates to Eretz Yisrael itself, as something special?
Yes.
Yeah, great. If I can pull something else out of that, I think it would be interesting too to talk about, like, is there a way to sort of link this to Rosh Hashanah too? Like if we're going down the rabbit hole of candles and what are they made out of? Is it beeswax? What does that mean? I think that there's a whole interesting sort of rabbit hole to go down. Do you see another hand? Yeah.
Candles add intentionality
Uh-huh.
to the act.
Right.
versus, going by the natural light or the moonlight. So I think in some sense it's intending for you to focus more on what you're doing and this particular mitzvah.
Great. So focus more on what we're doing. So speaking of the high holidays, what's one thing that we do that like characterizes the high holidays? What spiritual thing do we do? What spiritual thing do we, even the word is even check in there, not livdok, but something else. Cheshbon hanefesh, right? We do a spiritual accounting. I realize I'm looking at this side of the room a lot. I'm going to try to give my attention to all sides of the room. Cheshbon hanefesh. We go through this internal process of personal reckoning, and we think through, what we did right, what we did wrong, and how we could do better. And Bedikat Chametz, as a process, is a sort of a physicalization in a similar way of that kind of process, We're going through our homes. We're ridding our homes of chametz, of anything leavened. And then we take this final moment with a candle to cast, not light, but actually cast shadows and all the things that we've missed. So this is something that's interesting about the candle. Why not the torch? Well, like, let's look at the lights here on right above us. These are basically torches. They create so much light. We're to the point where if you were to look on the floor, you probably wouldn't be able to see crumbs very well, right? Because it's all illuminated. But if you had a candle and you held it at an angle, it would cast long shadows. So there's a practical aspect to it of like, what really helps you see the chametz. And then there's the spiritual aspect of like, let me really look for I did everything I possibly could. Let me take another shot at finding the things that I missed, right? Which is, I think, links very nicely to this idea of cheshbon nefesh. And then afterwards, as we heard earlier about the fun fact of the lulavim, when we do biur chametz, when we take that chametz and we burn it, we also release ourselves of having to look for any more chametz. We've done our due diligence. Then we look for the final pieces of it. Then we say, okay, I did what I can do, and anything that is left over, let it be like the dust of the earth. This is this whole sort of formula that we say when we do biur chametz. Amazing. Okay, so wow, we've spent a lot of time on one halacha, which I think shows how beautiful and spiritually generative it can be. Before we move on, I want to skip this next one. But before we move on, do we have any last reflections on this particular halacha question? Yeah.
I just wanted to say the next sentence. It says if you have a bright light, you don't need a candle.
Yeah, interesting.
Just by sunlight, it suffices.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh, the next one.
Okay. So great. So let's flip the page, and we're gonna spend a couple minutes on the next halacha, which should be Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 433.3. Does everyone see it? Yeah, great. So this is again, we're talking about berikat chametz, searching for chametz. One checks all places where there may be concern that chametz was brought in. Therefore, all rooms of the house and attics require checking. For sometimes a person enters with bread in hand, but wine cellars where bread is not suspected, as well as barns and the like, do not require checking. It's interesting. Let's just let this sort of marinate for a second. Okay, so where does this fall? Does this feel more practical or more spiritual? Practical. Why?
It tells to what extent one has to go up searching for chametz. So if you have in your mind to nullify it, that may be sufficient. It seems to be saying. And if you miss something, and at the end of the prayer we say for b'dikat chametz, so whether it's seen or not seen, it's as if it's the dust of the earth.
Right. So what you're pulling at, so we're talking again about biur chametz and sort of letting it be the dust of the earth, but also the practical element of like, there are some places where food is typically brought and food is not brought, right? And like, can we really track where we bring our food? And sort of our rabbis think like, well, we can't be so medakdek, so exacting. Like, we have to give ourselves a little bit of a break for a second. Like, do the work, and also know that, like, look, if you can't, there are some places where you don't need to be so obsessive. Like, whether it's a barn, whether it's an attic. I know that despite this, even though I used to have a very strict rule of like just eating in the dining room or in the kitchen, there have been moments where I've walked into into a bedroom or office with a snack or a sandwich and think, man, am I going to have to really do intense berikat chametz here? And the answer is yes, because the room is of my home. But we can't always remember all of that stuff, right? We can always remember where we may have brought a sandwich or a cookie or a granola bar or whatever that may have chametz in it.
My friend's wife put it very wonderfully in Hebrew rhymes. She said, Bali, Avat zelo chametz, ubali lo kavan pesach. Dust is not chametz, and my husband is not paschal sacrifice.
Which is interesting because again, like it feels like a yesh gvul moment. Like dust is not chametz. I love because this is a holiday where we could really like get so intense to the point of it being problematic, right? It's like do your due diligence, but then learn to let go, right? Learn to let go. Great. Let me look just through here really quick to see if there's one last one because we went through that one pretty quickly. Let's see. So let's skip to the last page and just talk about these two, the two at the top of the page. So synagogues and study halls require checking. For children, usually bring chametz inside, and I love that we just had a kid walk in. That's really fun. And synagogues and study halls require checking. Oh, this is duplicate for some reason, so it's just the one. So synagogues and study halls require checking. For children, usually bring chametz inside. So does this fall on the practical or the spiritual side of things? Practical. Why?
The only person I can sell it to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also nowadays, study halls like this.
Yeah. Right. I mean, look at us. We're eating food in here. The study hall. I mean, like, this is a very typical way of doing studies, having food everywhere. So it's pretty clear that, okay, we should probably check for chametz here. Now, I had a very strong response of this is a practical halacha. Let's try to make an argument as to why it's spiritual. Let's just try it. I don't even have an answer for it, but I would like to do it as an exercise. How could this particular halacha, that synagogues and study halls require checking because children usually bring chametz inside, how could that be spiritual?
It's not only children bring chametz.
Say it again?
It's not only children bring chametz. We throw candy at the bar mitzvah. Look at this room. So how could it not? How can it be spiritual? Because it says places which you frequent, even if they're sacred places,
Right.
require inspection.
So it's not just chametz, but you brought up throwing candy at bar mitzvahs, and which sort of connects us to.
There's a difference.
What was that?
By the very nature, chametz produces crumbs by its very nature.
Yeah.
You throw wrapped up candies and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or even apples and stuff like that. They don't produce crumbs, but chametz.
Sure
I mean,
they
we
do.
know
When you
matzah.
eat it, you
What
put
irritates
the
me
candy
about
out.
matzah is it just flies all over the place. You can't be neat and eat matzah at the same
Yeah,
time.
but even so,
it's all over the place.
But even so, despite of our best intentions of like, look, when like someone's always going to slip past the shul guard, basically, not the security guard, but the guard in front saying, hey, you can't bring your coffee and you can't bring your food in here, and there's going to be chametz somewhere. There just is. Go ahead.
I think if you associate comments with something negative,
Uh-huh.
comments is a sin or evil, then you can make it something spiritual.
Oh, interesting. Can you say more about that? That's interesting.
If you say that comments is associated
Mm-hmm.
with something evil or negative, then you can make it more spiritual, right? You look at it
Right.
or something, so you're removing evil from your house, you're removing negative thoughts. You don't want negative thoughts to fly in the air, you want to be more optimistic or something like that. That would make it more spiritual. Obviously, something negative, this seems.
Right. So if we apply sort of a spiritual quality to chametz, and sort of like we were saying before with the connection to cheshbon and nefesh, then we could see that as a process of somehow removing that negative quality from our homes. Yeah. Yeah.
Just to say, also, good food to see young children in the synagogue.
Yeah.
We have some.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, brings food. No, just it's a positive.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So it's really nice to see children in shul, right? Like, and we always notice. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like it's almost evolutionarily impossible to not pay attention to a baby when there's a baby around. You know, I feel like there's this thing that I kind of call village mode. We all go into village mode, and we're just watching the kid or hanging out, whatever. But like we very naturally in many ways are like, oh, let's care for this child. Yeah.
I just wanted to take that a little further. That if we see comments as something negative in this respect, and bringing it back to the high holidays, there is the aspect of sometimes you're not directly responsible for something not good that you did, but someone may have pulled you in, and so you have to be looking at, in that respect, it's a little spiritual, that you have to be looking not only for the comments that you left, not only your Cheerios, but also the kids' Cheerios in the backseat.
Yeah. So there's a sort of like a communal responsibility of like, look, this isn't just about my home, but it's about the kind of the chametz that we all bring into a space.
Causing
Yeah.
all
One final question before we close and bench and then Daven and Mariv. Who is the Pesach Seder for primarily? Who's it for? The children, right? We have the 4 children. We have the 4 questions. The purpose, in many ways, of the Seder of the Haggadah of the Magid is to engage kids in conversation about Passover and teach them, right? To sort of pass on, or at least encourage some of our most basic tenets of Jewish debate, thought, and contemplation, and hopefully resolution as well, or not. Some of the most interesting conversations in the Talmud have no resolution. That's in the Teku section, which is just a term for let's just leave it. But so with that in mind, it's again interesting that our attention is being in this particular halakha is being drawn back to kids. Like, notice what the kids are doing. Notice what's really going on during Pesach, right? There's so much to do. One of the reasons that is given in the Mishnah Berurah, which I think is included, I think I included this but didn't translate it, is that, the Mishnah Berurah also says one of the reasons that we also study the Halachot of Pesach 30 days before Pesach is because there are so many, right? There's so many things to worry about, so many things to get done. We're turning over our homes and kind of creating this whole new reality. I mean, Galot I was just in there the other day hoping to get some, I don't know, I was trying to get some like chicken nuggets or something, and it was already, Pesach chicken nuggets. I was like, no! But there's so much to do, and yet we're sort of called to notice. Amidst all of it, we're called to notice, right? If we're setting up a Seder, it's a lot of organizing, but still we're called to notice. Why are we there? What are we doing it? What are we doing, and why are we doing it?
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, go to www.tbala.org.